All right, class, this video will walk you through your homework with the visual hexagons. We are dealing with these visual hexagons. We are dealing with a period of time under the Articles of Confederation known as the critical period. And then we will also look at the drafting of the Constitution and the ratification or approval of the Constitution. Remember, what you have to do for homework is you just have to um, write down the identification for each image. These are essentially your background notes. Not all the notes that you will need are on the screen, so you will also have to listen to me as I stumble my way through this lecture. Then I've given you 6 questions on the blog, and you just have to link the image to one of those questions which you feel like represents the best fit or is most applicable. We will answer these questions in class the next day. I've gone through and I've situated the slides in chronological order in which they happen. They are not in the same order on your sheet, so you're going to have to look at the image and just make sure that you're writing down your notes in the appropriate spot. All right, so this first image, it is a political cartoon that looks at the Articles of Confederation, or this critical period from 1783 to 1787. This political cartoon, if you could see the whole thing, you have this waterfall of independence that's billowing over the rocks into a sea of anarchy. And then what boat is traveling down this waterfall and about to go overboard and into the Sea of Anarchy? The United States under the Articles of Confederation. So this should give you some sort of insight or idea as far as the success that these Articles of Confederation had. Some background to the Articles of Confederation. Some background questions first. What type of government would you expect to develop as a reaction to the British unity system? Would it be natural to expect an overreaction? Why was power in the hands of state governments preferable to power in the hands of a central government? You have to remember that these Articles of Confederation are drafted in 1777, the year after independence is declared. It's going to be ratified or approved in 1781 as the Revolutionary War is going on. So these articles reflect a fear of a strong central government. We are in the midst of fighting a war to get rid of a strong central government. It would make no sense to get rid of one strong central government only to replace it with another strong and central government. So these articles reflect the fear of a strong central government. Most of the power is going to belong to the states. All right, the federal government will have very little power. In fact, under the articles, there's only one branch of government, the legislative branch. It's a unicameral or one-house legislative branch. There is no executive branch, so under the articles, there's no president. And there is no judicial branch, so there is no Supreme Court or federal court system. The Articles of Confederation, they have no power to tax. They have to ask the states for funds. They had no power to regulate interstate trade. They had no power to enforce laws. It could only be amended or changed with unanimous consent. That means all 13 states had to approve it. So it wasn't very flexible, and it didn't leave for a lot of room for improvement, because the small states and the big states, the North and the South, they have very different priorities. And so the Articles of Confederation is it's almost just like a body that exists, but it exists without any sort of purpose. And so there's a lot of problems here, and so we tend to focus on all the weaknesses and the negatives of the Articles of Confederation and what it could and what it couldn't do. But there were some positive contributions that happened under this system of government known as the Articles of Confederation. Number one, they negotiated a peace treaty, the Treaty of Paris of 1783, that ended the Revolutionary War. We forget about that. We don't really give the Articles of Confederation any credit. The other positive contributions of the Articles was that it passed 2 key pieces of legislation: the Land Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Both dealt with the old Northwest Territory. We had labeled this Northwest Territory the Ohio Valley when we were talking about this during the French and Indian War. So just think about that same area that was disputed between the French and the British during the French and Indian War. This is the same territory that we're talking about now under these 2 pieces of legislation. So the first piece of legislation is the Land Ordinance of 1785. This said that the Old Northwest would be split up into 3 to 5 states. And to establish settlement and to sell the land to either companies or to individuals in an orderly fashion, so it's not chaotic, they adopted the township system of survey. And so they looked at New England and they looked at the states in New England and how they set up these towns, and everything was ordered and everything was on a grid. And they adopted that township system of survey. There's an image here to your left that shows a township system. This is what the sale of lands would look like under the Land Ordinance of 1785. Townships are 6 square miles, 6 by 6, all right, and divided into 36 sections, each 1 mile square. They also set aside the 16th section for the maintenance of public education. So the Land Ordinance of 1785 is making sure that the sale of public lands is done in an orderly process and that you're setting up for the people that get there so they can have a town, so they can create a community, so they can sustain themselves and develops the same characteristics and values that Americans back east had promoted for so long. The next piece of legislation that is passed is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This is going to provide the procedure by which territories can be organized into states. So the land ordinance is going to divide the land up and make sure that it's the sale of this land is going to be done in an orderly process. And the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 provides the procedures by which territories can be organized into states. When a territory gets 5,000 free male inhabitants, Congress appoints a governor and a territorial legislature may meet. Once you get to 60,000 inhabitants, the territory could write a constitution and submit it to Congress. If Congress approves, then statehood was granted. And this is a key thing about the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Once you're admitted into the Union as a state, you have the same rights as all existing states. So this is key here because it shows that there's no desire to establish a new colonial system with this new country, that the United States is going to adopt states on equal footing, and they do not want to start to create an empire, which they just broke away from during the Revolutionary War. Another key note here in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, all states that are going to be admitted into the Union, slavery is going to be forbidden. So now you start to see the divide between the North and the South, or free states and slave states happening thanks to the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And then once again, in these new territories and in these new states, public education was specifically encouraged. And so you're seeing a lot of the characteristics and the traits that the New England colonies had. You're seeing those carried over to these new states that are going to be created thanks to these new pieces of legislation. However, the most serious problems with the Articles of Confederation and the most serious weaknesses were economics. And a great example of this is Shays' Rebellion that happens in 1786. Daniel Shays is a Revolutionary War veteran, and after the Revolutionary War and after risking his life, he was now on the brink of failure. The problem for Shays was that he was a victim of too much taxation and too little paper money for which to pay his taxes. And like Shays, there were many farmers in Massachusetts that had reached the breaking point in 1786. People in the coastal towns where the merchants had sold goods to the farmers on credit had pushed through a state tax that fell heavily on farmers in the western part of the state. The farmers had petitioned the assembly for relief. They asked their representatives, think back to Bacon's Rebellion. This is the same thing that's happening. They asked their representatives for some sort of help, for some sort of support. And the assembly did not do anything to help them out. So, all through the fall of 1786, farmers kept demanding the courts to be closed so they would not lose their farms. Their discontent actually boiled over into mob action in January of 1787 when Daniel Shays led it's almost like this makeshift army of 1,200 farmers into forcing the courts to close. Shays' army then marched through the snow towards the weapon arsenal in Springfield, Massachusetts. So you have to think, in 1786 and 1787, Shays' Rebellion shows and exploits the weaknesses here that a weak central government has. There's serious problems here going on in the states like Massachusetts, and And people are angry, and people want support. And if the states aren't giving them support, then they can't go to anybody else. And you see that these farmers in Shays Rebellion are actually trying to take over a weapons arsenal. So they want to arm themselves, and who knows what happens after that? Are they going to try to take over the government? Are they going to try to overthrow the state government of Massachusetts? And this is going to cause panic throughout the nation. Every single state has debt-ridden farmers. Every single state has a group like Shays and his followers. Every single state has the possibility of a Shays Rebellion happening in their state. What if this rebellion and the spirit of rebellion spreads elsewhere? Not only is private property in danger, but so is this new nation's reputation. George Washington actually says, "What a triumph for our enemies to find that we are incapable of governing ourselves." And so even George Washington realizes after Shays Rebellion that something has to be done. And so a main result here is that you're going to get a lot of states to send delegates to Philadelphia in 1787 with the purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. This is soon going to be thrown out, and they're going to scrap the articles and start working on creating a new system of government that we will know as the Constitution. So at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, we want to know who's there. You don't necessarily need to write down the specifics, but just to summarize, who's at this convention? There's 55 delegates total. 2 delegates are college presidents. 3 had been college professors. 26 were college graduates. 4 had read law at the court in London. 9 were foreign-born. 28 had served in Congress. And most of the others had served in state legislatures. I think the most surprising thing about these delegates is that they're young. 5 are under 30 years old. 3 more were within a year of 35. The average age was 43. And so, you know, you have a well-educated group of people, you have a young group of people, and you have a group of people that are coming together that even though they have some differences, they were actually more alike than different in their thinking. All supported republicanism or Republican government. This is when you have the people vote for leaders who make your decisions. This is a difference. This is different than a democracy where people make the decisions. In a republic, which is what the framers of the Constitution want, you have people voting for leaders who will then make the decisions for the government. Most supported a balanced government. They realized here that you're going to need some powers belong to the national government, some powers belong to the state governments. You're going to need a separation of powers among different branches of the government. Most favored restricted suffrage. Most favored not letting everybody vote, but only allowing essentially white male property owners voting. Most favored a strong executive. They wanted a president, or they wanted an executive branch in this new system of government. There's going to be a second video here that picks up with the major components of the Constitution and follows with the next slides in this presentation.